Hello, everybody. This is Mr. Cole coming to you guys live from empty classroom. Just wanted to say that I miss you guys and that I hope everybody's doing well and staying out of trouble and staying healthy. And so unfortunately, uh, we've got to go about learning about economics through a more virtual classroom. It is going to be a challenge. It's something that is not going to be easy, but I promise I will do everything in my power to make it as simple as possible on you. So, with that, we are ironically going to be starting our unit, really our quarter, over macroeconomics. If you remember, the first quarter or third quarter was about microeconomics, studying individual businesses, the individual supply and demand of a product. What would happen to the price of peanut butter if the price of jelly goes down? That's very, very specific information. Now we're going to look at a national or an even global economy about how goods and products transition throughout the world. And with that, it's an interesting time to be learning about that, as it appears that the world could be entering into what we would call a global recession as a result of the coronavirus and the fear and stuff that is spread by that. So it'll certainly be an interesting time. I'll try and bring in current events as much as possible. I'm recording all these on Sunday night, so obviously if you're watching this during the week, with as fast as things are moving, things be changing in the economy, but I will do the best that I can to help you. Now, the unit that we are on is Unit 4, Measuring Economic Performance. With that, this unit will deal with basically how we know if the economy is doing well or if the economy is doing poorly. And then the following unit will be about how the government fixes it when it is going poorly. So first thing we got to learn about really is more of statistics and a data analysis about how good times happen and how bad times happen and how we know if we're in the good times or we know that we're in the bad times. So with this, really the big key is going to be over the term economic indicators. Okay, these are going to be measurements that indicate to us if the economy is doing well or if the economy is doing poorly. So you need to follow along with us in your notes packets for this entire unit, just like you would with me normally. I am going to have to do a little bit of like drawing and stuff on here that I've never done before, so please hang with me. If it's embarrassing, I'm sorry. Obviously, questions are always great. I will try to post other videos as well, other than just me talking, because maybe somebody else can explain it a little bit better over a computer than I can. But don't just, passively take this. Try and still come up with questions and things like that and shoot those over to emails and all that good stuff, okay? So with that, we are going to begin over Chapter 12, Economic Measurements and Indicators. And the most famous economic indicator, the one that if most you absolutely have to know, is called the gross domestic product. And you guys have probably heard of the term the GDP before, the gross domestic product. That's what we're going to be learning about. So the GDP, the gross domestic product, is the most important measure of the health of our economy, of any economy. It measures, and this is a big part right down here, okay, the final dollar value of all goods and services produced in a country within the borders of that country, okay? So if you look at the actual name itself, the word gross means total, okay? Domestic means like home within your borders, and product is what you produce. So it's the total amount of things a country produces in a given year, okay? Now that is within our borders of the United States. For example, if a t-shirt is produced in China, but is sold in the United States, that would not count towards our GDP. That would count towards China's GDP because they were the ones that actually produced it and then traded it with us. Okay? So anything that is counted in our GDP is actually what is made here. Okay? With that, the way the GDP is calculated, and you can imagine how intense of a job this would be to do all this, is basically the government has an agency who tries to get information from various manufacturers and employers and estimate how much that total dollar amount is. Now, the formula they take, okay, it's a lot of letters here, okay, is called the C plus I plus G plus X is the way they go about it. So when they measure up GDP, okay, they first take all products made for consumption, okay? So products that are going to be consumed by households. That is every computer households buy, every book households buy, every cell phone households buy, every pencil households buy, every box of Kleenex, every roll of toilet paper, every hand sanitizer, whatever. Anything that is designed for household consumption is counted. Okay, so you can imagine how much stuff that is. I was just kind of looking at my room there and thinking of things. So they take that number, okay. Then they add in the spending by businesses, because not all products and goods and services that are produced are for consumption, okay? For example, if National Machinery, okay, I would doubt, I'd be shocked if any of you have ever once used a machine produced by National Machinery, okay? Their machinery is being made to go and help out other factories produce products, okay? Meaning, if we left out, let's say Ford buys something from National Machinery for their factory, we would be ignoring the fact that there are hundreds of workers here in Tiffin, Ohio that are contributing to GDP, because we would ignore it because it's not going out for consumption. So we take and we look at all of the investment by businesses. We see the things like their capital goods, right? The things that they buy to help make other things, like the warehouses and the assembly lines and all that stuff, okay? And then they also look at the inventory that they have that they did not necessarily sell, okay? So the things that they produced but were not necessarily sold for consumption yet, okay? We take that, we add to the consumption, and now our number is getting really high. From there, though, we forget that there's a huge player in the economy that also produces a ton of goods and services, and that is the government, okay? They take government spending at all levels, local government, national government, because those are goods and services being produced. For example, right now, I am getting paid to produce this lesson for you, okay? Now, while this is not a thing for consumption, I'm not selling this, okay? I am still participating in the economy because I am being paid to produce a service, okay? All sorts of things, any government stuff, building roads, building bridges, running schools, anything that the government is spending its money on is counted as part of GDP. Now, the only exception to that is what we call transfer payments, things like welfare, because what GDP is really measuring is what is being produced, okay? When my money gets taken out of my taxes, let's say goes to a family on food stamps, okay? That money hasn't produced anything. The money's gone from my wallet right to them, okay? So nothing has actually been produced. Now, that money will be counted whenever that family goes and buys the food stamps. Then, of course, that would be counted as GDP for the food that was created to meet that demand, okay? But we will not count any sort of transfer payments. No welfare program, Social Security, none of that will be counted. Lastly, the final section of GDP components is our international trade, okay? So the government looks at what we are selling to other countries versus what we are buying from other countries, and they add this to the GDP. We call this the net exports. We take our nation's exports, we subtract the amount we have in imports. So for example, if we were to, let's say, bring in $2 trillion worth of products that we would buy from other countries, okay? So we buy $2 trillion of t-shirts and computers and phones from China, okay? But we only sell $1 trillion worth of our products to China, okay? That means that we have a trade deficit of negative $1 trillion. So on our GDP, we would subtract $1 trillion, okay? So you take this whole thing, C plus I plus G plus X, you add it all together, and you get what our nation's GDP is. Usually, this net exports is usually negative because America likes to buy a lot of foreign-made products. So usually that is negative, but other than that, America has an incredibly high GDP. In fact, we are the world's largest economy at number one in the world. Our GDP is $21.44 trillion. So that means, I think this is 2018 measurement, or actually maybe 2019. This is all a quick estimate, and all this stuff is never official until years later. But it's estimated that in 2019, the United States economy produced $21.44 trillion of goods, services, anything that you can think of that we talked about that was produced. Okay. Now with that, down here, China is the second largest producer in the world at 14.1 trillion. So you can see that we still have quite a lead on China. However, China is growing at a rate of about 6% every year, where the United States is only growing at about 3% every year. So if current trends keep up, eventually in the 2020s, China probably will surpass the United States at some point, or maybe the 2030s, as the world's largest economy. You can see Japan is third at 5 trillion, Germany at 3 trillion, India at 2 trillion, UK at 2.7, France 2.7, Italy 2, Brazil 1.8, and Canada 1.7. So you can see, if you really had to rank the world's kind of two dominant economies, it is the United States and China. Okay. Now I'm going to skip down because I realized I'd forgotten. So everyone see, I'm going to skip two types of GDP. We're going to do that later on. Skip down to what is not included for me. So there are some things, though, that are not counted as part of our GDP. Okay. The first one is called non-market activities. These are things that are still being done. It is part of the economy, but they're just not traced. For example, babysitting. Some of you probably are babysitting, maybe even right now. And you are providing a service and you are getting paid for that service. However, because it's not really official, because it's not taxing, it's not taxed, we don't really have a good record of it. So we don't really count that. So the GDP is always going to be lower because of things like that. Any used goods are not counted. Okay. Remember, GDP is measuring what a country is producing in a year, not what a country is selling in a year. So, for example, if we look at cars, okay, any new car, any 2020 car, that is going to be counted for GDP. However, if you go to Reineke Ford and you buy a used car, that used car will not be counted. It will not be counted because it already has been counted whenever it was produced. So if I go and buy a 2015 Ford Mustang, that was already counted in 2015. We never want to count a product twice. Okay. Underground activities are also not counted. Obviously, the economy is not always things that are legal. Things like drug use and things like that, what we would call an underground economy or a black market activity, those are illegal and thus are not counted. Although you can imagine that with all various underground trade, that number is probably quite high. And then lastly, we do not want to count any inputs to a product. For example, okay, a tire that is made in Akron, Ohio, okay, that is sold to a tire shop here in Tiffin, and you go and buy new tires. That product would be counted, okay, because the tire itself is the final product. However, if that tire is put on a new car, we are not going to count the tire because it would be counted under the car that was just produced. So we never want to use any inputs for things, right? So anything that goes into something else. For example, I'm going to use any sorts. The sugar that goes into a Coca-Cola can. If I go and buy a bag of sugar right now from the store, that would be counted. If I go and buy, or that same sugar, if Coca-Cola buys that sugar and puts it in their drink, it would not be counted because it's just going to get counted as the drink of Coca-Cola itself. So it gets a little bit complex about what is counted and what's not, but this is where we're going to end up leaving off today. So your worksheet you're going to have is about calculating kind of a rudimentary GDP, deciding what would get put in where. And then tomorrow and Wednesday, we'll start actually looking at why GDP is important. And why it's a number that we need to know and study very closely. So thank you guys for your attention. I know it was about 15 minutes. I tried to go as quickly as I can without rushing. So again, if you have any questions, please let me know. And then make sure to complete your worksheet for homework, okay? Thanks, guys. Have a great day. Bye-bye.